What does it mean to be a parent? How far do you think you're willing to go to protect your children? Would you trade places with them if something goes wrong? I think most parents would say that they would trade places with their children in a heartbeat. If your answer is that you would trade places with your children, let's kick this up a notch. Does being a parent mean that you should go to jail for crimes committed by your children? Hi, welcome to Collectively Vigilant. I'm Dr. D. Welcome if you're absolutely new here. Here at Collectively Vigilant, we learn the law through true crime. And if that sounds good to you, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And who am I? Well, I'm a professor and a lawyer who's really into true crime. The release schedule has shifted a little bit. Now it's no longer on a Monday morning. It's now every other Saturday evening now that the fall semester is in full swing. And we also have a podcast which I host with Sam, who's a psychologist. So I will link that in the description box below. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So, the problem of juvenile delinquents, which can be roughly defined as children behaving in out of control criminal ways, is a universal problem. But should we tackle it by punishing parents? Let's unpack this question today with three crime stories from three completely different countries. One story is barely a few weeks old and has not gone to court yet, while the other two stories do have parents who have been adjudicated in the court of law. And some of those perpetrators are right now in jail, spending extended periods of time in jail. Let's start with the case of James and Jennifer Crumley, who are parents of Ethan Crumley. 15-year-old Ethan Crumley was a student at Oxford High School, located just outside of Detroit, Michigan, USA. November 30th of 2021 was an ordinary cold day in Michigan. The ground was frozen, and around noon, students of Oxford High School were walking between classrooms. Ethan, wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and a backpack, walked out of the toilet with a 9 millimeter caliber ammunition. He raised his arm at a 90-degree angle and shot at the students in a sequence that he had already planned. He had previously written in his diary that he wanted to begin by shooting at a girl. He in fact wrote, quote, "has to be a pretty girl with a future so that she can suffer just like me," unquote. In 7 seconds, Ethan shot 7 students, beginning with Hannah St. Juliana, 14 years old, then Madison Baldwin, 17 years old, killing both of these girls instantly. Ethan then moved towards a classroom where students hid behind desks, some recording this attack over their phones. Some students leapt out of the ground floor windows to save themselves from the volley of his bullets. Next, outside of room number 225, Ethan shot at Tate Muir, 16, who died on the spot. A few minutes later, Ethan reached a bathroom where Keegan Gregory, who was 15 years old, was hiding with Justin Schilling, who was 17 years old. Both boys squatted on the toilet seat so that the shooter wouldn't see their feet. While inside the toilet stall, Keegan was texting his family. His texts are like this, quote, "help, gunshots, I'm hiding in the bathroom," unquote. Justin Schilling tried to hide behind the cubicle door. Ethan then shouted at both Justin and Keegan to come out of the toilet. He then ordered Keegan to stay put inside the toilet and asked only Justin to walk out. Both the boys complied. As Gregory resumed texting his parents, asking for help, Ethan shot at Justin Schilling, who died the next day in the hospital. Then he walked out and shot at Phoebe Arthur, who somehow survived this attack but will never be able to use her left arm for the rest of her life. He also shot at Kaylee Osage, who was shot at in her chest, all over her shoulders, and with sheer luck, Kaylee managed to cling to life. Ethan's last student victim was Aiden Watson, who was just simply walking out of his 9th grade classroom when he was shot at. He thankfully survived. Ethan also shot at teachers, and his teacher victim was Miss Molly Darnell, who survived after extended time in the hospital and many surgeries. 3 weeks before Ethan had shot and killed 4 people, and injured half a dozen other people, Ethan's mother Jennifer had taken him to a shooting range near their home, which is in fact not illegal. In fact, it's almost like a way of life in Michigan, Detroit. People usually walk around with two stickers on their cars, one praising the Lord, and the other is the sticker of a gun. In this part of the US, people are incredibly proud of their Second Amendment right, which is given to them by their Constitution. And millions of people honor that right without any incident. But that's not what happened with the Crumleys. What we have in this case are parents who had completely checked out of the lives of their son Ethan. As all the evidence adds up, it gives us the picture of parents who were extremely inattentive and very, very irresponsible, and they failed to listen to Ethan's cries for help and instead gave him a gun. Ethan had been verbalizing that he felt lost, ignored, and regularly reported to his parents for months on end that he was hearing voices. He said that he said all this even before he had even fathomed taking the lives of 4 students and injuring half a dozen people. In the months before the Oxford High School carnage, evidence proves that Ethan Crumley had sent texts reporting hallucinations, demons, and voices. For example, in a March 2021 text to his mom, he wrote, quote, "Okay, the house is now haunted. Some weird shit is happening. I am scared." Unquote. In other messages that he sent to his parents, he wrote, quote, "I hear people talking to me." Unquote. His parents dismissed all his pleas. His father, in fact, gave him a pill and then texted his son to, quote, "suck it up." His mother, quote, laughed at him, and then when Ethan requested medical help and psychological evaluation and intervention, she kept laughing at him. On the morning of November 30th of 2021, which was the day of the attack, a teacher at Oxford High School found a violent drawing and a note on Ethan's desk. It was a drawing of a handgun with the words, quote, "The thoughts will not stop. Help me," unquote, and a bleeding picture with an inscription which said, quote, "My life is helpless," quote, "blood everywhere." The teacher photographed this note and alerted all the school officials. The school's guidance counselor met with Ethan while they were waiting for his parents to arrive at school. They questioned Ethan about self-harm and about violent thoughts, but reported that his demeanor appeared calm. But this does not mean that they concluded that he did not pose imminent danger. They in fact begged Jennifer and James Crumley to take their son home. At this meeting, the parents and staff recommended counseling for Ethan, and they said this must be done urgently. And then they urged Ethan's parents to take him home. They did this time and time again. The parents, James and Jennifer Crumley, refused without taking their son Ethan back home. Unfortunately, nobody inspected Ethan's backpack. A few minutes after his parents left, Ethan killed 4 people and injured half a dozen people. As you can tell, it seems that the writing was on the wall and somehow nothing was done about it. And I'm sure, just like me, you're wondering what kind of parents would do that to their own child. From outside, Jennifer and James Crumley gave the appearance of being good parents. They in fact bought the gun that they gave to Ethan as a Christmas present, which is also somewhat of a rite of passage in Detroit, Michigan. Jennifer uploaded regular updates of her son to Facebook and shared pictures of her horses, and she also shared pictures of this gun that he had used. The Crumleys spent substantial amounts of money and time in buying and stabling horses. Jennifer, in fact, spent most evenings with her horses after work, and she was the main breadwinner of this family and worked in real estate. Jennifer put in substantial number of hours at work and climbed the corporate ladder and became part of the management team. In choosing to marry James Crumley, however, Jennifer certainly did not pick a winning horse, so to speak. James Crumley was in fact the father of 2 children who he had abandoned and refused to pay child support for by the time he married Jennifer. When it came to work, the reason, perhaps, I'm just speculating, that Jennifer had to spend so much time at work might be because James could never hold a job. At the time of his son's crimes, James was an occasional DoorDash driver who would occasionally be seen doing other odd jobs. Despite being at the house a lot more than Jennifer, James couldn't find the time or the inclination to lock up the gun they had given to their son in a safety box. Even when the gun was occasionally put inside a safety box, Ethan knew the code and regularly played around with this ammunition. After work, Jennifer spent a lot of her time almost every single evening with her horses and had affairs with a lot of men who were hung like horses, and she spent a lot of time doing what in parking lots around town. It's clear that the parents didn't bother with their son at all. And someone who's quite finicky about cleanliness, I must say that their house was in absolute disarray, and it doesn't seem like they had cleaned that house in years. After his crimes, Ethan Crumley pled guilty, which means that he did not go on trial. He pled guilty, in fact, to 24 charges, including 4 counts of first degree murder, terrorism causing death, multiple counts of murder, weapons charges, and formally he was sentenced on 8th of December of 2023. The judge imposed a life in prison without any possibility of parole. That means this boy Ethan is going to die in jail. And you thought this was bad. Well, remember that the actual attack took place on the 30th of November of 2021 at Oxford High School. On December 3rd, which was just 3 days after the attack, prosecutors in this county announced that involuntary manslaughter charges would be brought against the parents, Jennifer and James Crumley. The police was actually expecting that the Crumleys will surrender, and that's what their lawyer had apparently relayed to the police, that these people would surrender by themselves. But guess what happened instead? Well, these two, while their son was in prison, ran away from the law. And not only did they run away, they withdrew $4,000 in cash, and they turned off their cell phones, and then they disappeared with a burner phone. On the evening of December 3rd, when the sheriff's office figured out that James and Jennifer had run away, they in fact got the US Marshals involved into this, and they offered a substantial reward to anyone who would tell them where James and Jennifer Crumley, these two, were. It wouldn't surprise you that within almost 48 hours, because of, the substantial amount of money that the police was offering, these two were in fact snitched out by I don't know who, but these two were in fact caught. They were hiding in an attic at a friend's studio, and that's how these people were caught. So both of these people were then put into jail in early December of 2021, and then Jennifer Crumley's trial began almost 3 years later in January of 2024, and concluding on February 6th of 2024. James Crumley was also put on trial 2 months after his wife on 5th of March of 2024, and he ended, the trial against him ended on 14th of March of 2024. Both of these people, the prosecutors say, had substantial evidence against their parenting, basically. Prosecutors built their case against Jennifer and James Crumley on substantial record of evidence showing repeated warnings were missed, opportunities to rein their child in was missed, reckless firearm storage was clearly visible in this case, and parents were completely distracted. That's what the prosecutors put in the trial in front of the jury. Digital records establish that Ethan the son had deep psychological issues, and the parents knew about it. In journal entries, Ethan had written about this time and time again. His messages show that he was clearly hearing voices. He did say, quote, that the house was haunted, unquote. He also did say that he'd relayed this to his friends over text, that if his parents knew that he had these psychological issues, and if he would speak up more about it, the parents would be pissed off. Ethan, in fact, had described being ignored not only to his friends, he had described being ignored in all his entries that he was writing every single night. He did say that every time he would speak to his father would, quote, say, suck it up. Another confirmed piece of evidence which was actually presented in Jennifer's trial, and this is going to astound you, This is a text that she wrote to her son when the mother was informed by the school administration that he did seem to have bullets on him or ammunition on him on a particular day. She said, quote, "Lol, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught," unquote. This is in fact a text that she did send to her son. Minutes after the attack on this day, which was November 30th of 2021, when the news spread that Ethan was in fact the school shooter, Jennifer was heard talking to her boss and her co-workers, and she was basically more worried about losing her job than all the dead students who had been injured. These people at that point were being rescued by the police and dead bodies were being carried out. And this woman was more concerned about her job. In Jennifer's trial, her extramarital affairs came to light, and in James's trial, the fact that he was a deadbeat dad to 3 children was highlighted. Jennifer and James Crumbley were convicted of course, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, one for the killing of each of those children. On April 9th of 2024, both parents were then sentenced. So the trial for Jennifer happens in January, for James it happens in March, and in April both of them are finally given their sentence. So on April 9th of 2024, both parents were sentenced to prison for 10 to 15 years, meaning that at least these guys are going to serve 10 years in jail. And James and Jennifer's inaction and disregard for their son's escalating mental problems and their failure as parents was highlighted by the judge when he was speaking about it. And one of the judges, I remember, did say that this was a foreseeable and completely preventable tragedy. And I think as you heard this case, you and I have come to the same conclusion. This outcome marked the first time in the United States when parents were sentenced to lengthy prison sentences for a school shooting, for a child who had committed a heinous school shooting. Another new case that I should tell you about, which is also from the US, involves an 11-year-old from upstate New York who has been terrorizing a town. You heard me correct. Yeah, he is 11 years old.
Holding a mother accountable for out-of-control criminal behavior by her child. It's something police have been reluctant to do, but it just happened in Utica. A rare arrest, and police did it to prove a point and get other parents to exert more authority over their children. This week, police arrested 36-year-old Nutro Muhammad. Authorities say her 11-year-old son has been involved in at least 4 felonies: robbery, fire at a Walmart, stolen cars, and more. Because of his age, police say they can't charge him criminally, so they've turned their attention to the mother. Late today, Utica Police Lieutenant Michael Curley and I talked about some of the specifics of this case, why police and prosecutors took this very rare step, and what they're hoping comes of it. What message do you hope that this sends to folks in Utica and beyond?
So this is a very unique situation, considering the age of the child, the amount of crimes that he's been in, the lack of the ability for the police and the community to really do anything about it, coupled with the fact that Raise the Age has just kind of run amok amongst the juvenile population with this case in particular, and the fact that under 12 cannot be prosecuted in any criminal facility or family court. We felt it prudent that we had to do something in this respect.
When you arrested this mother in particular and explained why she was going to be placed under arrest, what was the reaction?
I mean, certainly she was unhappy, as dictated by our press release, and certainly I think everyone can understand that by the charge in of itself, this is not the first contact we've had with this mother. It wasn't that a simple juvenile stole a pack of gum from a local convenience store and we're charging a mother for uncare of a juvenile. This child has been in a multitude of felonies, to include robberies, burglaries, stolen vehicles, and a fire at Walmart. So it's not as if these aren't just true public nuisance crimes as well. So this kid isn't just out stealing things, as we said. He's not throwing rocks through windows. This is a case where a juvenile has created a multitude of major safety issues, and the mom has just been unwilling to try to stem those behaviors.
And you're sure it's unwilling, not unable?
Well, I think there is a very fine line between unwilling and unable. Once you've been notified, informed, and offered services on a multitude of occasions, and you're just not taking advantage of those things, nor attempting in any facility to try to rein in your child's behavior, What are we as the public and we as the police to assist the public supposed to do? Just allow the kid to continue wantonly committing crimes, committing violent crimes, and out there at all hours of the night without supervision? I think it was incumbent upon us just to prove a point that these kind of behaviors will not be allowed, obviously in very certain circumstances. Each and every time we've talked to mom, she either states she doesn't know where he is, or he snuck out, or he's out doing things. And these crimes aren't just occurring at 6 p.m. They're occurring at 1 a.m., at midnight, and later in the morning hours, in which it is their due diligence and their care to make sure their child has proper supervision. And each and every time we've encountered this child and brought him home and spoke to mom, we found that it has been a lack of all care, supervision, and neglect potentially. I mean, obviously, that's a charge that can be explored later down the line, but things that just cannot continue due to one, the age of the child and the serious nature of his crimes.
Is there any worry that coming down on mom could make the life of the child worse if mom is saddled with court time, fines, whatever, potential jail time, something like that, that things could end up worse for the kid?
Understood. It's a concern. However, I think in this case, it is endangering the welfare of the child. So we are arguing that mom's behavior has created a situation which either allows this child to act in this behavior or has been unable and unwilling to take care to cease this behavior. So I would argue that mom's own behavior has created the situation in this child's life that he is just free and wanton to do what he wants. And we need to stem that behavior somehow. And if this requires mom to get the services, to adhere to the services and comply with services, I think we've helped the child in the long run.
In this case, Utica police say they went for a misdemeanor charge against the mother, hoping to get her attention but not upend the family. The punishment could be probation, court-ordered services. Rarely would it be jail time.
The way the information has come out, it seems to me that here the mother is a single parent, Neutro Mohammed. She's a single parent. She may be working extended periods of time because of that, which is not an excuse. It does seem like that the child does not even go to school, which is very strange for an 11-year-old. And did you hear the long charges that the police has against him? It is amazing that this boy is only 11 years old. And by the way, it's also a crime in most countries around the world to have your child not go to school. This, in fact, is called truancy. And in most countries, there are very strict laws against letting your child miss too much of school time. And there is a reason behind it. Because criminologists often frame truancy as what's called, quote, the school to prison pipeline. For example, the US Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention notes that chronic truancy, when children miss too much of school, is in fact linked with and strongly correlated to higher crime rates and a lot of jail time later in life. Similarly, in the UK, government research has shown time and time again that truancy, which is missing school a lot, is actually correlated to antisocial behavior later in life. That's why, in fact, UK is one of those countries that does send parents to jail for their children who constantly miss school. Several parents in the UK have been prosecuted against in cases of truancy under a very specific act which is called the Education Act of 1996, which makes it compulsory or mandatory for children to be spending a lot of time in school, not outside of school. Now, let me give you a few examples. There's an example from 2013 where a mother called Melanie Plinkington from West Yorkshire was jailed for 8 weeks because her 15-year-old daughter had missed around 50 days of the school year. In 2017, Elizabeth Buchanan from Scotland was found guilty of truancy for her son, and she had to pay a fine of £750 because her teenage son was apparently refusing to go to school. More recently, in 2022, Julie Bates of Stratfordshire was sentenced to 6 weeks in prison, which was later suspended because her child was continuously absent, with even though she was informed several times and given warning several times. These cases illustrate that UK, in fact, does impose fines of £2,500 and does give custodial sentences to parents who fail to secure their children's regular attendance. Treating chronic truancy is, in fact, sounds like a very minor infraction, but actually it's a neglect of duty as a parent. Now, let's move on to the case that became infamous in India in May of 2024. And if you thought James and Jennifer Crumbley are terrible parents, well, the case from India proves overindulgence by rich parents is terrible parenting as well. On May 19th of 2024, a 17-year-old drunk boy by the name of Vedant Agarwal, he is the son of the real estate tycoon Vishal Agarwal and his wife Shivani Agarwal, crashed his father's Porsche at a high speed in Pune's Kalyani Nagar area. His car collided with a motorcycle, and there were two people on top of that motorcycle. One was Anish Avadhya and the other one was Ashwini Koshta. Both were 24 years old and both were IT professionals. The crash killed Ashwini on the spot, and Anish later died in hospital. After the crime, after this crash, a mob dragged Vedant and all his drunk friends and the chauffeur, who was also in the same car, out of this car, and they allegedly assaulted and beat these people up even before the police arrived. When Vedant was arrested, he was drunk and he did not even have a valid driving license. So the police does arrest him and they take him to a private hospital where his blood was drawn. And this is where the power of money and corruption begins in this case. A drawing of Vedant's blood was done at the private hospital, which is called Sasson General Hospital, Sasson or Sasson, later around 11 a.m. And at this hospital, Vedant's blood was in fact discarded and thrown away and then replaced by his mother Shivani's blood at the instructions of the forensic head of the hospital. Investigators say that hospital's errand boy, a peon as we say it in India, executed this swap and money did change hands. Later on the same day, this 17-year-old boy was later released, and when he was given bail, he was in fact asked to write a 200-word essay about traffic safety rules. That's it. 200-word essay for killing two people. After a lot of media pressure and pressure from outraged public of India, arrests were made of two doctors and one peon and two middlemen who had arranged for Vedant's parents to do all this corruption and evidence tampering. In fact, Vedant's parents, Vishal and Shivani Agarwal, were also arrested because of this evidence of tampering of evidence. Thankfully, in this case, the police also ordered a parallel precautionary draw of Vedant's blood at a government hospital. Prosecutors say that the family tried to even bribe the doctors at that government hospital. However, thankfully, the doctors there refused to take any money, and this later helped the prosecutors prove this in the court, and this helped expose the manipulation at the private hospital. So, thankfully, in this case, the parents and in fact even the grandfather has been arrested and thrown into jail for bribing doctors and for changing blood. This family goes even further than just bribing. They also trapped the chauffeur in their palatial house in Pune and beat the driver mercilessly so that he would falsely confess to the crime and take all the blame for their son Vedant. And who was doing all this beating, you ask? Well, of course, it was the father and the grandfather. They wanted to blame the driver, a poor man who couldn't afford to stand up for himself. He couldn't afford the clout that these people have, and of course, doesn't have the money all these people have. And that poor man was also physically intimidated and beaten up. The police has in fact filed a 900-page charge sheet against the 10 accused in this case, including the parents Vishal and Shivani Agarwal. The Juvenile Justice Board refused the police's request to try Vedant Agarwal as an adult. You do remember that he was 17. And in their ruling, the Juvenile Justice Board says that the offense court does not qualify as a heinous crime. The police have since challenged this decision in the court, and the parents in the Pune Porsche case have been in judicial custody for some time. The parents in the Pune Porsche case were in jail and were in judicial custody for at least some months. Shivani Agarwal, the mother, was in fact jailed for 10 months before she was granted interim bail by the Supreme Court. The father, Vishal Agarwal, has been in custody in connection with this case and all the several charges. And he was basically at one point also in the Yerewada Central Prison, and he has been in jail. He has not been able to get out. When we talk about juvenile crime, it's easy to focus on the child holding the weapon. It's also very easy to focus on the child who put his key in the ignition. But behind every act like this, there is a web of choices, silences, indulgences, which are made by the adults. Being a parent isn't about shielding your children from the law, it's about shaping them so that the law never has to step in. Whether it's neglect that breeds despair or privilege that feeds arrogance, both destroy lives in exactly the same manner. The Crumbleys in Michigan and the Agarwals in Pune remind us that parental love without accountability isn't love at all. It's abandonment disguised as care. Maybe the real question isn't how far you would go to protect your child. Maybe the real question is how far would you go to raise your children right, even when it's uncomfortable? Because parental responsibility does not end at birth, it in fact starts at birth. Right. So you heard these cases from the UK, you heard these cases from India, and you also heard the case from the US, two of them, in fact. Let me know your thoughts about all these cases. What did you think about them? You, as parents, how would you react? How do you discipline your children? What is the right way forward? I look forward to your comments. And until I see you again, stay collectively vigilant.